I've been banned from speaking to the venues in Argentina because as soon as they get an email in English, everything costs 2.5 times as much. so Danny and her family have banned me from speaking to them.
Fair.
We'll see where that goes.
Yep.
Not getting ripped off is so far the biggest motivation I've had to learn Spanish.
How's it going?
Learning Spanish?
Yeah.
I've been trying for 10 years, mate. I know when I'm in trouble.
Well, that's just
I know
a lot
when
of
someone's
tone,
hungry, tired. Yeah, and I can just about be polite.
Fair enough. I don't understand how people can learn another language. I still fuck this one up, so.
We got so many coaches who are international.
Yeah.
And oh my God, the amount of respect I have for I think what we do can be complex anyway.
Yeah.
But then doing that in another language just blows me away.
Yeah.
I think we consider ourselves relatively good at what we do, or like knowledgeable enough to at least earn a living by it.
Yeah.
If you put me in Spain, South America, any other country in the world, that didn't speak English, I'd be terrible.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I genuinely, it makes sense that they can speak it if they practice it enough, but I can't.
Huge amounts of respect. It's take complex subjects and then have to do it in another language, and to know what you know and then go to another country and not be able to communicate what you know and what makes you and what, your career. I think I'd find that incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
So any of our international coaches, big props.
Yeah. I guess it's one that, did you learn any foreign languages when you were in school?
Yeah, we did 2 years of, I did German.
Right.
You could choose between German or French.
Okay.
And I did German. And it was so bad that in my oral speaking exam, the tutor just said, if you get really stuck, you could just try saying things with a German accent and they might give you some points. I was like, right, that's comforting. I ended up developing this super complicated code because you were allowed to take pictures with you.
Yeah.
So I ended up making my own hieroglyphs, which I had deciphered, to be able to get through this oral exam, which it probably would have just been easier to learn the German words.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. I'm not.
You made your own language.
Not good at it. There are certain things from a learning perspective that I soak up, and there are certain things my brain just rejects.
Yeah.
And learning languages seems to be one of them. I've been trying for about 10 years to learn Spanish. So.
But you're persistent, mate. You don't give up. So
yeah, it's come close.
It's one of those things, I guess, it's very much an English-speaking country thing to not really branch out and learn different languages because we kind of don't have to until you do. And then you're like, I haven't done this for 20 years or learned something like that for 20 years. And
yeah, I think marrying a Spanish speaker is probably going to be the incentive that I need to dig down into it. But we'll see how that goes. I'm not making any promises.
Fair enough. Okay, what are we going to talk about today, mate? You got some questions from your Instagram, you said?
Yeah, most of them relating to communication. Surprise.
Yeah.
Around having difficult conversations with clients, or just addressing behaviors with clients that they might not be as ready to change. Things like alcohol consumption or, social occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol was the one that came through twice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is I think you posted something this week but there's something about before you go to tell, ask, or something along the lines of...
Yeah, what did I say? Telling them what you know is part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But helping them use what they know is often where the magic happens.
Yeah.
But that's the foundation really of the idea of coaching, to promote autonomy, to bring out from the individual what they know.
Yeah, because it's definitely, I'm sure it's a frustration that a lot of coaches run into at a point. And I know I have in the past. And off the back of the developments that we've done, I went down the route of reading the motivational interviewing and the coaching for performance, and that made a big difference. And just like, because it's so easy, we get into a position of, most of the time we're a directive coach when we're in the gym, because we are the expert in the exercise. And you can't, we've spoke about it before, and I think we might have spoke about it in the last podcast, but you can't always be asking someone for the answer when they are not the expert in that. But off the back of the developments we did on coaching, they're the expert in themselves, and that's where a lot of it comes from. Yeah,
I think personal trainers are in an unusual position. So, and it's a scale. So you've got, if you think like a coach, like an organizational coach that is purely non-directive, their job is to sit in a conversation, they let the client set completely the agenda for change, and they just help them explore where they go. And then you might look at like a sports coach who is on the field or in the gym with a large group of people, incredibly directive, because they've got to manage a lot of people. They've got to create intensity and timing and keep people safe. We're in a middle ground where we need to influence the performance in the gym, but we also need to influence the behaviors outside of the gym. And in the gym, a directive approach for most people, I think it does change as you work with people that are a little bit more capable, so you can become slightly more non-directive. But for most people who we're introducing to exercise, helping them learn a new skill, keeping them safe in the environment and doing those things like developing timing and intensity, we need to be directive. I'm not going to ask an open-ended question when someone's got, a couple hundred kilos on their back. We're going to tell them a short, sharp cue that gets the job done.
Yeah, that's when you don't want them to be thinking of an answer.
Exactly. And I'm going to drink more this time because I realized how croaky I got on the last podcast.
Were you in the development that I did, sorry to cut you off, that I did, and I drank all my water, but then I swallowed a piece of dust, breathed in a piece of dust, and then just could not stop.
Unfortunately,
coughing.
I think I missed that one.
Yeah, I did not live that one down for a while.
Well, I've got a bottle of water. You've kindly provided water. I got a cup of liquid coaching. Yeah, so we're good to go. But we're in the gym. We've got to be directive. We've got to, there's a time and a place for that. And people are coming to us for our expertise, and they want us to put in advice and provide them with information that they don't have. But if we are trying to change a behavior, what we tend to see is, unless a person is already completely committed to changing that behavior, using a directive approach often results in that person pushing back, which, we can dive into if you want to talk more about. So there's just some key concepts that we pulled from motivational interviewing, and we've tried to build into our consultation processes and the education that we give our coaches. And I think one of the most important to understand are these concepts of ambivalence, the righting reflex, and psychological reactance, which all come from motivational interviewing. The ambivalence, for anyone who's not familiar with the word, it just means that we've got arguments for and arguments against change residing within us. And it's a place where people can be for a long period of time. And I think as coaches, we often make the mistake in thinking that all behaviors are equal, in the sense of, if I come to the gym and I show that I'm ready to start training and exercising, therefore this person must also be ready to make the same changes to their nutrition and their lifestyle behaviors, such as drinking alcohol. But that's often not the case. They might be in this action stage for coming to the gym and working out, but they might be completely unaware, or contemplation stage of changing lifestyle behaviors, such as stopping drinking. So that's the first thing to understand. People can have good arguments for and good arguments against. And then the second concept I'd come in with is psychological reactance. So when a person is ambivalent, they don't really respond very well for being told what to do. So if you've ever given health and fitness advice to your friends, families, loved ones, it always kind of looks like, I'm thinking about training more. And then us coaches are like, oh my God, this is our moment. Yes, mum asked me for, help with her program. Dad asked me, what is she doing in the gym? And we jump in and we're like, do these things. And then the next thing they say is to defend why they haven't done those things already. So it's like, oh yeah, but I haven't got the time and I tried that and it didn't work. And I'm sat there like, you literally just asked for help. And it's because we've got this, I don't know if it's a remnant of our lizard brains, but being told what to do, even by someone that is well-meaning, and giving useful, helpful advice, can often be perceived on a subconscious level as this person is trying to exert dominance over us. So we push back. Yeah. And then the problem with pushing back is we learn about our attitudes and beliefs by hearing ourselves speak. So the language that we use the most, or the behavior that the language reinforces, is usually the behavior that sticks. All right. And this comes down to something called change talk and sustain talk, where any argument that is verbalized for change is considered change talk. So if we take the alcohol consumption, we get a client, he comes into the session and he says, you know what, Matt, I'm thinking about not drinking this weekend. I'm like, oh, why is that? He's like, well, I've noticed that I sleep better when I don't. You could consider that change talk. Yeah, sleeping better is an argument for changing the behavior. And then like in the same sentence, they're like, yeah, but, it's my mate's birthday at the weekend and having a drink or two is not going to hurt. That's how I relax. Yeah, he's a really good mate. I don't want to let him down. And you got all these sort of like social context that's associated with the behavior. And you'd refer to that as sustain talk. Okay. And if a person's verbalizing that, it's more likely that they're going to sustain the behavior that they're, currently exhibiting. So when that person verbalizes that initial change talk, let's say the coach jumps on that and goes, oh, that's a great idea. You should do this. You should not drink. And I got a better idea. Let's do this challenge where you don't drink for 4 weeks. All right. And we try to be super helpful and apply structure and all the rest. And then what happens is the person kind of goes, oh, no, that's a bit more than I was expecting. I was just kind of testing the waters with this idea. Yeah. And they then start arguing against it and telling us all the reasons why they shouldn't. And because they're telling us all the reasons that they shouldn't, they're reinforcing the behavior that was there already. So what we could do is ask questions at that point that explores the change talk. So someone comes in and they exhibit, a desire for change. Right? I'm thinking about whatever it might be. Like, oh, what's brought that up? And they're like, oh, this and that. It's like, well, what would that look like? Oh, well, I could drive and then I wouldn't be tempted to. Or I could get a non-alcoholic beer and this conversation is now them putting forward ideas about how they would change the behavior, which makes it more likely to happen. They're going to more likely to commit to it because it's something that they've suggested. Now that concept of the righting reflex, that is the overwhelming desire to win the conversation. It's that sort of thought process where if I can just say the right thing, I can convince them. And unfortunately, the more you care about the conversation, the more likely you are to adopt the righting reflex. Like I know a fair bit about this and I've been telling people about the importance of this for quite some time now, but I still catch myself doing it. If I'm speaking to my partner, if I'm speaking to my sister, someone who, I really care about, I will literally be watching myself make all the mistakes that I'm aware I'm making and still do it. Like, no, you got to do this.
Well, that's comforting to know, mate, that
100%.
even you still have that. This is such a hard thing to do. And I noticed that there's a couple of books, those two books in particular, but there's another book, 48 Laws of Power. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it. I've not read that one.
But same sort of thing, how there's a constant power struggle. Human beings are always having a power struggle of not from I think sometimes when people think power, they think, domineering or whatever it might be, but just people want to be in control of the situation and what they're doing. And you can see it it's when if you were to accidentally start like an argument with someone, knowing you can't change that person's mind because they are going to want to try and have their power over the situation and vice versa. And it's the same thing with when you should do this, you should do that. It's a big trigger for me.
Those two things collide. So that writing reflex, your desire to win the conversation, to convince the other person, is met by a stronger reactance.
Yeah.
So we end up in a position where the coach is arguing for change and the client's arguing against it. And I've literally stood on the gym floor and heard it happen around me.
Yeah.
And, that's exactly where we don't want to be. We want the client to be the person that's arguing for change. So, what we listen for in the conversation is really important. And probably the best advice I can give to somebody who's wanting to help a client change a behavior is listen out for that change talk. Now, motivational interviewing's got a acronym, and I remember the acronym, but I can't remember all of the words associated with it. It's called DARN-CATS, and I reckon I can remember like the first 4. I think it's desire, ability, reasons, and need. And then I can't remember what CATS is. But basically, it's if the person expresses a desire for change, an ability for change, a reason or a need for change within the conversation, those things should act as triggers for you to be like, ooh, change talk. And then your question should be aimed at exploring that change talk, not necessarily put in more advice or information in at that point. So I use that as like a little bit of a mental trigger to be like, oh, that sounded like change talk. Let's ask a question about that thing. And questions like, tell me a little bit more. What would that look like? What impact would that have? Just helps people to explore the change talk that they're in and just kind of tip that scale so that there's more change talk than sustained talk to the point where we get an action. Once we get an action, it's just about keeping them in that action stage, right? And I think I've just kind of like blended in stages of change into that, which I didn't necessarily mean to do, but it's all these things are kind of woven together.
Yeah, DARN-CAT is desire, ability, reason, need, commitment, actuation, and taking steps. Yeah.
Well, I got 60% of it.
Yeah,
I'll take that.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to do. Particularly, I've made attempts more in like the last 18 months to be very, very conscious of it, and I'm better at it than I was like prior. But it's such a challenging thing to be in that situation when you know the answer.
Well, there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I think, especially with newer coaches in the industry, there's a lot of pressure to feel valuable. So there's a lot of things that can lead to a person being overly directive. Being nervous, so being underprepared or nervous and wanting to be seen as valuable can lead to the person just trying to put too much information in, stuff information in. We speak a lot about the communication style that you're going for in a consultation in particular is, more of a guiding style, perhaps leaning towards a following style, where you're just working at understanding the person. And we teach that so that coaches don't accidentally create barriers or defense in their client or potential client, before they've come to understand them or built a relationship where they can challenge them. So in that consultation, just working at understanding the person's perspective, but guiding it so that the content remains relevant to what we're about to do, and not jumping in, trying to be valuable and changing behaviors in the consultation. So a person comes in and says, I really want help with my nutrition. And the coach is like, oh, great, I know things about nutrition. So, right, we should do this. And starts telling them all these things. And you become at risk of challenging a behavior that's deeply ingrained in emotion before you've spent 10 minutes with this person. It's the wrong time to do that, So the consultation, we hope, remains sort of like in that following style. But it's that need to deliver value that often leads to people feeling like they need to be constantly have all the answers. Motivational interviewing really shifted my perspective in the sense of a conversation should be a dance, not a wrestling match, so both people, sometimes someone's leading, but both people are working together and complementing each other. And that the person on the other side of the conversation is an expert in themselves. You got to treat them like that, and they have a lot of valuable information to put into it. And then all those concepts from like coaching for performance start to make sense, in the sense of if a person does contribute an idea, you're teaching them that their opinion matters, and you're promoting their autonomy. And promoting that autonomy, as what we discussed last time, self-determination theory, is closely linked to intrinsic motivation, or probably one of the most powerful motivators of intrinsic motivation. So it all starts to feed into each other and lead hopefully towards the person being more committed because they had more input in the behavior.
And yeah, that's absolutely right. I've noticed big changes in my business and my consultation when doing that, and just something that stood out to me there. I think it's once you understand those overarching concepts and the approach that you would take in a consult, I think it's very easy in a consult, because if you know that going into a consult, you're like, I'm going to sit down with my notepad and I'm going to listen to this person. And then it's very hard one thing I was thinking is when you're on the gym floor, you've got that hat on of, I'm the coach, I'm in charge. And it's very easy and just thinking for myself, I know that when I get a question where I'm on the gym floor, I really have to consciously think about the answer. And I know that oftentimes I might mess up on it because you are in that situation where you are more directive within that environment. But I don't have as much of an issue of it now when I sit down in a consult, because I know that I'm going to ask the questions and I'm going to listen and adopt that style within that environment. It's very challenging to switch between.
I think that when you're on the gym floor, you should be predominantly directive.
And
at the start of the relationship, you should be predominantly directive in the gym environment. But you should have little triggers for yourself where it's kind of like, okay, I'm about to go into a review. So in this review, I'm not going to sit down and tell them everything that they need to do. I'm going to use the review process to, affirm their competence in what they're doing. So demonstrate that they've made progress, show them that the effort that they've made is resulting in something, which is really important. I'm going to use the review process to promote their autonomy, so promote their involvement in the process so that they're more likely to commit. Ask them, to provide solutions for problems, and then demonstrate to them that the information that they've contributed is important, and that we're going to move forward and incorporate their suggestions into the process and promote their autonomy. And then there's going to be in between moments where you're on the gym floor and they hang on. All right, they have a question, and that question is related to something that isn't like immediate. It's to do with a behavior. And at that point, we might just use little micro coaching moments where it doesn't have to be a hugely deep, non-directive coaching, where we refuse to provide any solutions or answers, but we just sort of like just hold off on that immediate insertion of information. And when the person says, what should I do about the birthday party that I'm going to this weekend? And rather than saying, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, just literally saying, what have you thought already? What have you considered already? What options have you already considered? And they go, oh, well, I could do this, I could do that, I was thinking about that. And you say, well, I think they're great ideas. Which one are you most likely to stick to? And they say this one. And I'm like, let's give that one a go. How do you want me to hold you accountable to it? I'll shoot you a text, see how you got on. And that takes a minute, 2 minutes of conversation, but it's a little micro coaching moment where you've promoted that person's autonomy and competence. And they're more likely to commit to it because they suggested the idea. It wasn't something that they were told to do. So just little moments like that often fall in that gray zone. And then when we're trying to teach and be an expert, and you don't ask someone to solve a problem that they don't have the information, experience or patience to solve. But when they do have the information, patience, or experience to solve the problem for themselves, don't rob them of the opportunity to contribute.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a very challenging thing in that because you can easily get caught in the more directive. I know that's something that I'm working on doing, but a lot of the time, like you said, the autonomy and them taking ownership over the situation and allowing them to make that decision makes a big difference. I move it around all the time.
Yeah.
Lucky people can't see it on Spotify.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good.
So,
Mate, I actually tie it into... So I try and blend a lot of these concepts together from my own understanding, but I tie it into movement.
mm-hmm.
So I think non-directive, directive, it sits on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And we just want to be able to move between it and choose the right position on that continuum for the context of the situation. I liken that to sort of movement. You know, when we look at movement patterns, take like flexion and extension, for instance. Neither of them are bad. We want to be able to move between that continuum, you know, to be able to have access to all of the benefits of the two positions. It's just that if we get stuck at the end of any of these continuums, the issues start to arise. So if we're consistently directive, then in the opportunities or contexts where being directive is useful, it's useful. And when it's not, it's not. And the same thing, like when you look at these positions that we're teaching, you know, because we're going to have a chat more about the positional stuff. If you're stuck in extension, then it's great for things that require extension, but it's not great for things that are not. So really, it's just about understanding these continuums, understanding these scales, which apply to a lot of different things. And then how do we teach people to have the awareness to be able to move along these continuums?
And that is that you can't change what you're not aware about, what you're not aware of, and then once you're aware of something, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah, those two pillars that they give you in coaching for performance has made it, from a leadership standpoint as well, so much easier to teach. Awareness comes first, responsibility comes second. And I think just as a coach, if that's your entry to coaching in the context of what we're talking about, that's going to do you a lot of good. Because often as coaches, we ask people to take responsibility for things that they're not fully aware of, and they can't. You can't control what you're not aware of. So even as an entry point, if we're like, okay, I want this person to change this behavior, are they aware of the negative impacts of it? Are they aware of the need for it? Are they aware of their capacity to do it? And if not, then that's where we should start, by trying to raise their awareness of the thing before asking them to take responsibility for it.
At what point do you be more directive with something like behavior change? Is there any point, or do you try to always be more non-directive?
I'm going to be 80% in that non-directive camp because that's where I've seen the most success. When a person suggests an answer and it fits within, you know, the possible options of what's going to be successful, then giving them that autonomy has always led to more commitment. But if I've got someone who is working towards a goal that they've already decided is important to them, there's no ambivalence. You know, they know what they want to get out of it, and they're coming to me with a problem that needs solving, and it's not something that they've got the information to solve for themselves, then I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to be like, here's an answer, you know, because that's what we are as meant to be, as sort of like experts within this content. You know, so somebody comes and the problem is, hey man, I had a go at this thing, this happened, I don't really understand where to go from here. I'm not going to be like, this is more about solving the problem, not developing the person. And that's how I make the choice. Is this context about solving the problem is more important to get the problem solved quickly? And if that's the case, I'm going to be directive. Try this, give it a go. Here you go, new information. If the context is more about developing the person and showing them that they've got the capacity to solve this problem for themselves, then non-directive. And what I find is, both from a leadership standpoint and from a coach standpoint, there is usually more long-term benefit in taking a non-directive approach. So mostly I'm going to sit in there, but there are situations where urgency, you know, you want to reduce the likelihood of failure. If reducing the likelihood of failure is most important, directive. If it's time precious, if it's urgent, if the person isn't in a very contemplative mood or lacks the patience, to be non-direct, to think for themselves, then go directive.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I do as well, again, from a lot of that stuff is if I am going to be directive, I'll try to ask permission first, just so at least then if they say no, then that's fine. Or if they say yes, then I'm like, okay, cool. Or do you mind if I give, advice or what I think? Because yeah, it's a challenging one to manage. But like you said, it makes a big difference to the whole.
That's a really good point though, mate, like that you bring up, like that asking for permission. So saying, do you mind if I put something into this conversation?
Yeah.
You are much less likely to get a defensive response from that. That's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, and I think it's from, like you said, a bit of at the start with, it's like a little bit of a dance. So it's a back and forward. And I think even in that, the way that I conceptualize it, even when you are doing the non-directive coaching, there's always a battle of power in some way, shape or form, and we're still trying to not assert our power in a bad, negative way, but we're trying to, control the conversation, not control, but get them the outcome that they want or whatever it might be, help them work through it. And if they're consulting with us in some way, shape or form, then we have an element of power, but so do they as well. And just having it go back and forward with the questions, and then sometimes when you, like you said, you need to be, or we talked about being more directive than asking permission, and at least then.
And you can put information into the situation and promote autonomy at the same time. So I think motivational interviewing refer to it as like a menu of options. But you can say, all right, what have you considered already? And let's say that what the things that they've considered are wrong. You know that they won't work. It's the wrong approach for that particular person. Even though promoting their autonomy is important, sending them off on a wild goose chase is not what we want to do. So we can bring them back to on course by saying, well, here are some things that I've seen work in the past, and then provide a few options. Which of these do you feel is most appropriate for you? And then they still get to choose their path forward, but you've provided context of options that will work. And I often find that's a useful middle ground. And to go back to your question before, like when you can be directive, I think that comes down to once the relationship has been established. So if you came to me and asked me for advice about something, I wouldn't feel like I couldn't tell you directly, hey, this is what I've found to be useful. Because we've already established a relationship where I know that you'll take the information on without feeling like I'm, trying to assert myself on you or undermine what you already know. And I know that you'll not just do it because I've said it. You'll take the information, you'll process it, and you'll consider whether or not it's appropriate for you, because we've developed that over time. And there'll be a lot of coaches that have developed that relationship with their clients where there is that trust and understanding, and they've kind of arrived at, okay, in this situation I can be directive, and in this situation I'm going to be, more non-directive. Even when the difference between immediately providing feedback after you've completed a set and giving that person a moment to put some input in, can change that relationship that way and prevent the person from becoming too dependent on the coach and, promoting that interdependent, that collaborative relationship. So when they finish the set and you just hold back on saying what and you say, what did you notice? What was the difference there? And let them contribute something. And then you put forward yours, and between the two of you, kind of weigh up what you've seen. Even that as a shift with more capable, more experienced clients can be a nice middle ground for that non-directive.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed that as well too, particularly with things like obviously when they don't understand what's going on, being directive, but then when they start to get you know, a little bit of skill acquisition with a movement or something, weightlifting comes to mind for me. And then asking them, you know, what they feel and where they're at makes a big difference, because I guess at the end of the day, we do want to, we want to promote autonomy and empower people with the information or the coaching process so that they can then go and replicate it by themselves.
And competence too.
Yeah.
You know, when they put forward an answer and you're like, absolutely, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
You know, and you give them that confidence that they have the competence to do the movement and understand it. They are more likely to do it on their own, but they're also more likely to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Because we want to feel good and have that sense of mastery of skill and see ourselves progressing. So there's a lot of positive things that come from, you know, just giving people space to contribute in the gym and outside of the gym.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to have to go back and read those books and recap them, because there's some things I've probably forgotten there. But they made a big difference for me. So if there's any PTs out there listening, which I'm sure there are, go listen, go read those books.
Yeah, I mean, motivational interviewing, that third edition, I think is the most recent one. I've been through it 10 times. You know, the book's carved up. Every time I read through it, there's an aha moment, or dozens of aha moments. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we go into our roles with formats and structures for programming, exercise selection, exercise execution, but very few people come into the industry with a framework of how they're going to approach conversations. And outside of our exercise information that we're inputting into it, the conversation is the thing that you're going to be doing the most.
Yeah.
You know, so having a framework, whether it's the one we're discussing, you know, which is kind of a blend between, you know, traditional coaching approaches and motivational interviewing, or it's something completely different. You know, I've spoke with coaches that are, you know, big on NLP. You know, whatever the format is, I just think it should be something that's considered and not something that you should leave to chance, because the impact of it is huge.
Yeah, and I guess the big takeaway that I got out of that is it's having the frameworks. Frameworks make a massive difference because they allow you to, it's not like a strict, rigid system. It allows you to navigate between certain things, because you'll have certain landmarks that will come up in a conversation, and then that is the catalyst to the next point in the conversation, or whatever it might be.
That framework becomes a reflective tool that you can use to get better after each conversation.
Yeah.
So, you know, we might walk away from a workout and go back to a format that, or a course that we did that laid out a structure for exercise selection, and be like, oh yeah, it would have been better to swap those exercises around, or oh yeah, cool, I can see why I didn't get the result that I wanted from that final exercise. And the same thing with conversation. You know, you walk off the gym floor and you're like, oh, I don't feel like, you know, something in that chat went wrong. That person was arguing back against the behavior that they asked me that they wanted to change. What happened?
Yeah.
And you can go refer to these frameworks and, you know, just self-coach yourself. Self-coach yourself. I mean, that's pretty much how it works, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, get better over time. But without those frameworks or those understandings of these concepts, there's a lot left on the table that could make a fitness or health and fitness coach much more impactful.
Yeah. I noticed a big difference with my consult, and even like the teaching that I've been doing recently, just having like a framework and touch points to go through. But also one point on that as well, that same sort of overarching concepts. And another thing with the teaching that I've done recently and learning from Tom is, you know, not assuming knowledge or lack thereof, and then assessing the knowledge and then filling in the gaps from there. And it makes a big difference when even going into that conversation with a client, or when teaching, going like, you've got experience doing what you've been doing, so I'm just going to assess kind of where you're at. I'm not going to stand here and dictate, because you probably have a good amount of knowledge already as well too. And then if there's any gaps that I can fill in, I'll fill in. And if you've got any questions, then go like that. And then it's a collaborative process, and that's a lot of what it is. And then people take ownership over it, because it's I think every coach has been in a situation where they've dictated information, and you have that, and then you get frustrated and there's no retention. And
I'm still terrible for it. No, I'll
I think you
cover some of the classes, and, you know, I find myself stood there going off on tangents. So it happens to all of us.
But I think, well, one, you've probably earned the right to be able to do that to a certain extent. And there is obviously, I think I know when I've had learning experiences before when people have just dictated a couple of people that have external presenters before at the gym, and then it really gets people on a bad foot, like on the back foot to start off with, from whatever, people don't like it to start off with, and you're not very receptive to information. And it happens on, in the classroom, and then it can happen in a consultation, and it can happen on the gym floor.
Yeah, Tom Merriman, for anyone who's listening, because we got a lot of Toms.
A lot of Toms and a lot of Matts.
Yeah, he sort of introduced the idea of the explore stage when you're teaching. I think it's the 5E model.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. So, you can explain and, give information if you've explored what the person knows, so that you're not making those assumptions of either having knowledge or not having knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's, same with our clients, right? We give them the benefit of the doubt that they're the experts in themselves, believe that they've got something to contribute that's valuable, and then we help fill in the gaps and explain what's necessary.
Mm-hmm. I think that was very valuable chat there from you, as always, mate.
Well,
I'm sure everybody's got some takeaways there from that. Is anything else on that you wanted to touch on?
Oh, really, mate? I think that kind of hits all the buckets that we got from the questions beforehand.
Cool, awesome. Shall we move on to some exercise stuff?
Let's do it.
Let's chat about the PRI and your experience with it, and kind of how you come about that, because that's something, or that sort of model and approach to training is something that I've integrated more into my coaching in the past year, and seen some big success, and always could see the things. But we did a workshop with Connor Harris and went through was it 2 or 3 days? 2 days of like extensively working on it, and made a big difference. How did that come about for you, and how do you apply it with your training?
So we were pretty lucky that 8 or 9 years ago, we had a coach working for us called Mark O'Brien. Mm-hmm. Great guy, great coach, also a physical therapist. And he was one of the sort of early adopters of the PRI content over here in Australia. PRI is Postural Restoration Institute, for anyone that's not familiar with it. And they really explored the impact of breathing on movement. It's clinical, and especially back then, it was a really deep rabbit hole, and ever since then, it's become an even deeper rabbit hole. But we did. He introduced a few concepts to us, which I thought, okay, that has made something click for me that hadn't previously clicked, and makes a lot of sense of what I'd seen over a long period of time, and these consistencies that I'd started noticing. And there was an opportunity to jump onto one of these PRI integration to movement and fitness. That might not be the title of it, but that's how I remember it. Courses when they did one over here. And when we went, there was about 30 people in the room, and it was 26 clinicians, so physiotherapists, physical therapists, and 4 personal trainers, from Fitness Playground. Myself and Tom Merriman were 2 of them. I think it was Hamish and Sean were the others. And
is that then?
Yeah. So, and we.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Before then, I'd done 1 or 2 of the online courses, and I'd got a couple of the manuals and things, and I'd been playing around with the. We tried to incorporate the positional work and the theory of sort of establishing position to mainstream gym environment. And that's what movement fundamentals was originally. And then we're at that course, and I walked away from it thinking, there is so much content here, and why are more people not adopting it? And my conclusion was that it's just too much. It's hugely complex. There's a lot to it. And the deeper you go into it, the deeper that content goes. And I was like, well, what's the minimal effective dose that we can take from this and give to personal trainers, so the work that they do in the gym is going to have a better chance at resulting in the stimulus that they're trying to achieve to produce the results that their clients want to get. And what we kind of walked away with initially was just, let's teach people this concept of what a kind of optimal position of the rib cage and the pelvis looks like, and what the impact is of that on, range of movement, giving leverage to target muscles, producing force, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Let's kind of just like get that there first. And we use the word position, I think, stack. Sometimes it's referred to as like neutral spine. A lot of people are chasing the same idea. Position for us came from when the rib cage and the pelvis are aligned, or the pelvic floor and the diaphragm are aligned, you create something called the zone of apposition, which means that the diaphragm has the capacity to dome within the rib cage and do its job well. And that kind of got shortened down to position. And really what it is can we restore a kind of more of a neutral start point for people? Because a lot of people are walking in to the gym in these varying stages of compensation that often start with some amount of extension. Okay. And the idea of understanding center of mass really made a big change in how I coach and how I teach, and how looking at a person's center of mass and how they manage their center of mass often determines the tensions that we're seeing within certain muscle groups. So the way that I explain it to coaches when we start out is, we are upright, and we're moving forward. Center of mass kind of lives around about our belly button, and we get pulled forward and down by gravity a lot, and our continued ability to stay upright usually results in some sort of extended position or increased tone in extensor muscles. Now, that often looks like the pelvis being tipped forward somewhat, the rib cage being protracted and flared somewhat. And that position, when you look at trying to teach fundamental movement patterns, so squats and hinges and pushes and pulls, that position can be detrimental to creating the space that's required to achieve those movements. So we were like, all right, well, how do we get people into a more optimal position for movement to occur? And that's where the breathing came in. So, we picked up some of these PRI concepts around 90-90, side lying positions. And what we saw is that it became a really effective teaching tool for helping people get out of these extended positions and teaching them to breathe in a way that creates space within the rib cage and the pelvis. And movement requires space. And if we can give people more space, usually they have better movement options. And what we started to see was better joint centration. And because of that, we were getting better muscle activation. And it really kind of like filled a gap in teaching people. It was like a lead domino in coaching. So prior to that, someone's knees would roll in, and, the industry was telling you in a squat, you'd see, a knee roll in, and it was like, oh, that's a weak glute. So give them a banded glute exercise. And, when we started paying more attention to these influences from these courses, it was kind of an understanding of, well, that person is creating space to move into because they don't have space available to them at the start of the movement or throughout the movement. And then these exercises put them in the more neutral position that provided space at the joints for them to be able to move with less compensations. And that's kind of like where it all began. And then over the years, more of this information has come into mainstream fitness. I think Bill Hartman's a huge influence. His work around ISAs and the infrasternal angles and the categories of wide and narrow. And I don't think his model had a name for a really long time, but I think he's just recently now referring to it as like the unified health and fitness model. I probably butchered that, but it's definitely got the word unified in it.
Let's have a look.
Because I think he was a huge influence. The guy's super smart. And he's been a huge influence on this content becoming more applicable in our industry and in more clinical environments. And then a lot of people that have been influenced by him have then continued to do a great job at pulling PRI concepts, pulling Bill's information, and then communicating it to a wider audience on social media. I think Connor's right up there with that. He does a really good job of communicating this information. Zach Couples and Alex Effer are two of the others that I often recommend people, pay attention to. And then whoever's style of teaching you like, just spend some time there. And there'll be things that you can incorporate into your coaching on the gym floor that will help you get a result quicker, help people continue to train without pain for longer. But it is important to recognize that any of these things, you can follow one strand of it too deep, and too far. And you'll see a lot of conversation online now around, training requires stimulus, and if you spend too much time with these low threshold sort of, in quotes, corrective exercises, you're not going to achieve the results that the client's looking for. But, minimal effective dose, use the right thing at the right time, can help you get a result quicker, which can help you apply the stimulus that you need to get the client what they're looking for. The big thing for me with Bill's stuff is compression and expansion. Mm-hmm. Just recognizing that everything that we do in the gym is compression. And when you add load to something, the person becomes more compressed. The more compressed you are, the less movement options that you have available. So a powerlifter wants to be compressed because they don't want to have a lot of movement options when they're shifting a huge amount of weight. But somebody new to the gym who's looking to learn how to move, or someone who's not new to the gym and wants to continue to move well over a long lifting career, understanding that creating expansion and reducing compression helps maintain movement options, is really, really important to know. And for me, I just think about, movement requires space. Space is expansion. Lifting weights requires compression. And you just got to kind of strike a balance, that's suitable to the individual and to the individual's goals.
It's called Bill's method, Unified Health and Performance Continuum Model.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, no, it's such a cool thing. And particularly with the people like Connor making it a little bit easier to digest because it's such a complex model to understand.
Yeah.
And making it easier to digest and easier to break down, and then for someone to consume and then explain to someone else and make a big difference. Because like you said, if you can go down the rabbit hole of it, and then on the point of training requires stimulus. So the more you do of the low level stuff, the less of you're going to do of the training.
It's a really difficult thing. I think anyone who makes their living providing educational content online about exercise, selection, execution, delivery, it's a tough thing to do because you're always walking in this gray zone where it is so individual, and context matters hugely. And social media polarizes so much, so when a person puts out this information saying, hey, this thing's useful for this, there's going to be another lens that someone else is looking at saying, yeah, but it's not optimal for that. And it's like, yeah, fair enough. But in this context, it's useful for these people this way. And imagine every post was like, hey, here's an exercise that might be useful for some people some of the time. Who's going to pay attention to that?
Yeah.
So these guys have got to put out information and say, hey, this is good for this and this is bad for that. And that creates these divides, and then, you know, Instagram promotes arguments. You know, algorithm loves confrontation. You know, often on social media, the loudest voice is considered correct. And I've made a deliberate and conscious decision to not put out a lot of content around exercise selection and delivery. I find that, you know, I want us as an organization to be known as people that excel in coaching, communication, the application of these skills. So my social media is more focused on, you know, what's it like to work as a one playground coach, plus here's a skill set that we, you know, find important and we want to develop our coaches in. But getting into that realm on social media is difficult, and, you know, unless that's the entirety of your time, and I'm just not willing to get into back and forths with people online, which are 90% of the time gonna result in, in some cases and in this context and in this gray area. So I don't know where I went with that one. That's one of my rangents.
Yeah, the rangents.
Before the podcast, we were talking about going on rants or tangents. So there's one of my there's my rangent.
Man, it's such a hard thing as well too. It has honestly limited me a lot for a while with posting content around exercise, because because of the context of things, and it's hard to say. You can't obviously say all the things, you know, in one post, and you can never get it right. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because that's the context that it's going to be said in.
And you just got to be clear on who are you speaking to, and then drown out the rest of the noise. You know, and then the people that do see value and connection with the thing that you're putting across, they're the people that you're trying to, you know, talk to anyway. And when a coach is trying to develop their business, that's important. For me, you know, I'm not really looking to promote my personal training business online. I mean, or just my business in general. I'm not trying to like bring in more business, and I'm not trying to create arguments or disputes, which sort of divides coaches, because I get frustrated when you have people online that kind of demonize any area of education, because it stops people from just being curious, trying something and learning something new and applying it. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing of our industry and our role, is that there are so many things that you can learn and so many things that will have a positive impact on your business and your clients. And for people to be sat there and be like, oh, I'm interested in this, but this person says that it's a waste of time, so I'm not going to do it. And then, oh, I'm interested in this, but this person says it's a waste of time, so I'm not going to do that. Just go and learn as much as you can, but then spend time on developing these critical thinking skills, and, you know, speak to mentors and speak to colleagues about how and when it's the appropriate time to apply that information, because there are more roads to Rome. Hang on, I don't know what the right analogy is, but there's a lot of
many ways to skin a cat.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's, I mean, fairly gross, but a lot of different things will work.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to get locked into one particular way of thinking. And, you know, and I don't want anything to discourage people from learning about what they're curious about. So I just try and avoid these kind of polarizing debates, even though, you know, from a social media standpoint, they're good for business, right?
They get the algorithm running. It is, I think, it comes back to our conversation the first time around with when you, in terms of the critical thinking, you know, we had a similar approach in terms of like starting out. I would take any client on that I could, and I know that was the approach that you took. So then you start to see, you know, many different people. You start to pick up ideas on, you know, how people move, and you see it across a broad spectrum. There are similarities across that broad spectrum, but then there's also, you know, massive differences as well too. But it comes back to, if you have like an overarching set of principles, knowing, you know, exercise selection, knowing programming principles, and then, you know, if you layer into it stuff like the PRI model, it just gives you, the lens to look at those things through and critically think as well too. And I guess everybody's been in a situation that looked at something on Instagram and gone, oh, that's wrong. But the more you train people, the more education you do, the more you should start to be able to zoom out and see things for what they are. I was having a conversation with Robbie yesterday about his approach to nutrition now, and it's something that he's changed his mind on with nutrition and not being so dogmatic with some things, because his views, say 6 to 12 months ago, were that everybody should eat loads of carbohydrates no matter what. And then he's done some more education, which is excellent, and he started to realize if someone's pre-diabetic, they probably shouldn't be eating loads of carbohydrates. So for me to say, that's wrong, you shouldn't be doing a low carbohydrate diet, in that context, it fits. Yeah. I think one of the things, to come back to the PRI model really, really quickly, and my experience with it, it's, again, like an overarching principle, and it's allowed me to identify things really quickly and get people out of pain very quickly. And the way that I conceptualize it with a lot of the, quote unquote structural drills or corrective drills, is they allow a window of opportunity for you to then start to load the new position. And my thinking of it is, if we can do that, I don't think the lower level breathing drills will be, they open up that window of opportunity, and I could be wrong with this, but then the heavier stuff or the strength stuff will then allow you to solidify on top of that and reinforce a new position and actually train that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm in the same lines of thinking. The way that I communicate it is, compression reduces movement options.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person walks in with reduced movement options, and the outcome that you're seeing from those reduced movement options are either they can't do the exercise well enough to get the stimulus, to get the adaptation, or they're in pain when they do that exercise, then what we've got to do is we've got to increase their movement options. Mm-hmm. So to increase movement options, we've got to reduce compression. Mm-hmm. So the breathing drills, the positional drills, they create space and they increase movement options. You then integrate that into a movement pattern, whatever level that their motor control allows, in order for the body to learn that there is space there that it has access to. And then when you reintroduce appropriate levels of load, you reintroduce compression, but you've also then given people the tools to get out of that compression, if it then gets to a point where you're starting to see, restrictions in movement and potentially pain. And there's a point that each individual person has got to find on that continuum that they're happy with. So if you are somebody that wants to put on a load of muscle, you want to develop aesthetically, that superficial muscle that you're putting on, and by superficial, I don't mean shallow, I just mean on the outside of the body, that muscle that you're putting on is going to compress you. And there is a certain amount of compression that will give you certain accesses to ranges. So for me, I have tried to find a middle ground where I feel comfortable with, how I look, and the amount of hypertrophy work that I do, I know comes at a cost to certain movement options. Mm-hmm. However, I then try to strike a balance and integrate movements into my training that produce expansion, so accessory work or conditioning work that reduces compression or continues to explore the ranges that I've currently got access to. And I think that that's the middle ground that I've tried to implement with my personal training clients. They want to get strong, and we're going to use bench press, we're going to use squats, we're going to use deadlifts, because they are effective ways to make that person strong. But then in their accessory exercises, I can take them out of further extension by giving them a hook line position for this accessory. I can take them out of further extension by not having them press fully overhead because they don't have all that shoulder flexion range. So I'm using exercise selection to, decrease unnecessary amounts. And then I'm including, exercises like 25 cals on the assault bike, a 40-minute steady state on the assault bike, whatever it might be, to put them in a position of, flexion and to get them rotating and to use that breathing to create expansion, and, not unnecessarily producing just more and more and more and more compression or more and more and more and more extension. So I think it comes down to where you want to be. Because if you're someone that wants to be a bodybuilder, you're somebody that wants to be a powerlifter, somebody that, you want those things, then you'll achieve them at the cost of these movement options, potentially.
And that's right. But also I think you can, the way that you explain, the way that you set up programs, and I'll do it as well in a very similar manner, as you can still integrate those things in there. Like a lot of the breathing drills, it's 2 minutes at the start of a session to be able to at least be in a better position, and then maybe one or two other exercises. And another thing that I conceptualize about it is, the way that I think about it is, a lot of what the model does obviously works on breathing and then gait, which are two of the things that you're going to have the most amount of repetitions of anything in your life.
Exactly.
For the most part. And
hope so anyway.
Hope so, yeah.
Breathing's,
very good.
Right
important.
up there.
Yeah. And if we can, positively affect that, then you're going to have more practice being in a good position even when you're not in the gym, which is then going to help you stack up more good reps and more practice of the thing that you need to do to probably be not in pain, particularly walking as well too. Yeah, it's been really, really beneficial for me. And it's one of those things is like once you start to see kind of the asymmetries or the patterns, it's hard to not see them.
Yeah.
But it's also really, really cool to see, there's tools that you can integrate to pull someone out of a position and put them in a bit better position, and also get them back to doing things faster than they could have otherwise. Or
I think it plays its role the most within my own business or within our teachings at the start. So when you want to provide people the best opportunity to be successful at the movements that you're prescribing, it has a good role to play there, because a lot of the positional drills, yes, they create the space that you're looking for, but they also provide an environment that is less complex and easier to adopt and feel the things that you're trying to feel. So the person, if you want to introduce somebody to using their obliques to creating a position which is going to make them safe and give them access to range in a barbell back squat, you don't want to teach that while they're stood up with weights on their back. You want to get them down on the ground, introduce the concept so you can, as quickly as possible, integrate it into their movements, so that when they are learning to hold the bar on their back and, manage their center of mass on the way down, they're not also learning how to create that stack or how to create that initial position. So they're good teaching tools at the start. And then if you give that person that thing, the other end where it's useful is when things start getting a bit tight, a bit uncomfortable, a bit painful. And you don't want that person showing up and trying to push through and train in pain, because that's making the whole situation miserable. So you've now got some tools to reduce tension, give someone a better start position for their joints, which is going to make the movement more comfortable. So those two situations is where it typically comes in the most for me.
Yeah, and particularly starting a session with it, I was talking to Matt Wall about it the other day in his application of breath work and the way that he does it. But I've had clients that have had pain before, and even just getting them to go into the gym and start with some 90-90 breathing or side-lying breathing just actually gets them into the gym and focusing on their session, as opposed to being physically in the gym but mentally still at work, and then you go into a heavy deadlift and then
it brings them into the present moment, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's also important that people that are unfamiliar with the idea of using breath to change the body's structure, because a lot of people will look at a breathing drill and associate it with calm and meditation and parasympathetic nervous system, which it can absolutely have an impact on. But, in this context, what we're discussing is your muscles of expiration, the muscles that are involved in breathing out, have a unique ability to be able to bring in line your pelvis, your rib cage, literally change the shape of the pelvis and the rib cage, which then results in having the ability to move more efficiently. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because you might have somebody come in at the start of the session and use a breathing drill to get them in a position to be able to then work well. But you then might also have someone do a breathing drill at the end of a session to decompress and start shifting them over into parasympathetic, before they then go back into, a sympathetic driven work environment, and after stepping out of a sympathetically driven, coaching and session, and having that little switch there that allows them to get into that those recovery processes sooner. So there's different applications of it, and it's important to understand. I think that in the context we've been discussing, we're talking about breathing as a way of changing structure.
And setting you up for a better time in the gym. How are you doing for time, mate?
10.
Cool. Let's go your top 10 exercises and why.
All right. So first, when I was thinking about this, I was like, this is going to be a difficult question because of everything we just said around individual context. But then when it's like, well, no, for me specifically, that's quite easy because I train in my garage. So I've got a limited amount of equipment.
Very good way to train.
I love it. Yeah, we work in some of the most beautiful, best equipped gyms in the country, if not the world. But for the most part of my life, I've trained in isolation. The sports that I've done have been, more personal, like you work on your own. And not to say that there aren't people involved, teammates and coaches and stuff, but I just love that headspace that I get into when I'm, it's just me.
Got Bugsy pumping.
Yeah, exactly. And I like training with my dog. So, I'm right now, I am pressed for time, and I'm only training 4 days a week at the moment.
It's unlike you to be busy, mate.
Yeah, I got an unusually busy month coming up. So the program I put for myself right now, I'm doing 2 strength sessions a week. I'm doing 2 conditioning sessions a week. So my first conditioning session of the week is boxing. So I'll do, sort of 10 rounds. I'll just move around the different bags. 50% of it in an orthodox stance, 50% of it in a southpaw stance. Just that gets me breathing, gets me sweating, gets me using ranges of motion, gets me rotating. So for me, that's my kind of rotation gig. Also, cardiovascular, love it, and the balance between that aerobic and alactic, hit something really hard and breathe consistently over a long period of time. The second half of that session, I'm then looking at club bell work. So club bells go into my top 10 exercises. Anyone who's not familiar with a club bell is like a really heavy baseball bat, a metal baseball bat, and I've got them from 8 kilos up to 20. So you can do some single hand work and you do some double hand work. The reason I like club bells is, and I'm kind of just lumping them in as one exercise, but obviously there's a million exercises you can do with them.
Matt Wall did the same thing.
Yeah. For me, everything I've learned about the shoulder teaches me that the shoulder is not just the shoulder joint. Your integration with the shoulder blade and the rib cage, they all need to work together for the shoulders to be healthy and performing. So any sort of club bell movement, whether that's going to be some sort of cast or mill, you got grip strength, you got that integration, what happens in the core, you've got more rotation, and you got that relationship between the rib cage, the shoulder blade and the shoulder. So they're going to be somewhere.
Hips in there as well too, wouldn't there be? Some movement of the hips.
Yeah. I love it. It's an integrated movement, which I think is a good reflection of how those systems work together, and great for grip strength as well.
Very like functional, top to, you know, from all up and down the chain. How do you program it for? How do you program it? What reps and sets would you do, or how does that look?
Yeah, so the lighter bells and the single arm work, I kind of use that as prep work for any upper body session. So I might do 3 sets of 10 reps of a mill on either side, or a reverse mill on either side. And then if I'm using it as conditioning, or using one of the heavier clubs, you could do as little as 5 reps either side with a 20 kilo, or I do it for time. Mm-hmm. So the application of reps to it, very similar to what you would with anything else. If I'm using it for a warm-up and to sort of like get everything moving, then the rep ranges are going to be higher and the weight's going to be lighter. If I'm using it for strength, then the rep ranges are going to be lower and there's going to be more sets. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm using the middle ranges for conditioning, then it'll be for time. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll just stick the stopwatch on and I'll do 30 seconds of work and then 30 seconds off, or whatever it might be. So the application is very similar to what you do with other exercises or equipment.
Mm-hmm. Matt Wall was saying he uses his for like an aerobic conditioning drill where he'll do it for minutes on end or something like that, and he said it's really effective as well too.
Yeah, I very rarely do it for more than a minute. A minute might be like my longest set with something. That's probably just because I like holding as heavy a weight as I can.
That's what he said. He said you probably have heavier ones and he has a harder ones.
To get him round for a club bell session. All right, moving on from the club bells, I still incorporate some body weight movement, and that's usually on that Tuesday session where I do boxing and club bells. Mm-hmm. So I would put the parallettes in there too. So things like L-sits or tug planches, anything where I'm holding my body weight in space. I think that both the L-sit and some planche variation, you know, because I could probably knock out 30 seconds each in those positions. They are good for core strength and they're good for shoulder stability. So I put them in the session where I'm predominantly it's core and shoulder focused, mm-hmm. Which is the boxing, the club bells, and those exercises on the parallettes. That's one session, and that's always similar. You know, I might swap a kettlebell in for a club bell. I might swap in the rings for the parallettes, but the idea is the same. Then my lower body strength session, so you'll be very happy to hear, Matt, starts with a squat variation.
Good answer.
Well, I struggle with squats. Squats are the exercise that I've probably had the most difficulty adhering to consistently and just feeling like they're effective. I broke my leg in 3 places when I was 14, got a spiral fracture, and the way that I was rehabilitated and the knowledge that I had back then, it's just led to a little bit of tibial torsion. So my tibia sits just out of where it should sit in like at the ankle and the knee. Well, I want to say sits outside of it, but there's a little bit of twisting going on there that makes dorsiflexion and knee flexion on that side not super comfortable unless it's meticulous, you know. So even though I've persevered with it, I've figured out a way to do that movement because I see a lot of benefit in doing that movement. You know, I'm not just doing it because I feel like you have to squat. Like, I recognize that it's worth making an effort to control that movement to get the stimulus that I get from a squat variation. So my lower body session starts with a squat because it's, for me, the highest complexity. And then a Nordic variation. So I usually go
also a good answer.
Yep. Just before I went away on holiday, I got to the point where I could get a couple reps off a single block, a single yoga block. And then I came back from holiday and I'd lost it.
Oh, mate, they disappear
so quick. You know, so now I'm back into my like Nordic hip hinges, eccentrics, razor curls, you know, just trying to get them back.
I wish I never tore my hamstring and let mine go.
Yeah.
That day I tore my hamstring, I had done 10 Nordics before. And then I jumped into the splits and popped my hamstring.
Yeah, fair enough. Your hamstrings, you'd asked enough of them. They're like, sorry, mate, we're out.
Yeah.
We're done. I think that's a great exercise. Difficult, I like and effective. So
I think you can put from a knee flexion standpoint, you can put way more tension and force through the hamstrings than you can on like a leg curl or something.
But yeah, I mean, that's probably a longer conversation. But looking at flexor muscles versus extensor muscles, but I think you don't have a hard lockout in the flexion exercise like that, and you're doing an extension exercise, which I think plays into it. So anyway, I'd have that in it, and then I typically go to a unilateral exercise from there. So reverse lunges if it's raining, walking lunges if it's not. Occasionally a real elevated or front foot elevated split squat. Depending on what the rest of the workouts incorporated in it. I know I'm not giving you exact exercises, but kind of groups.
That's a good coach, mate.
Yeah.
Using all the principles.
And I'm not in this current phase doing like a heavy deadlift, but
I think you've completed that one though, haven't you?
No. I just got long arms, man. I'm close to the ground. It's a cheat. It's a
250 kilo.
It's a cheat code, long arms, mate.
I tell Mel that all the time.
Yeah.
I would deadlift way more than you if I had longer arms.
And
say that to Mel, not you.
Well, they've got that wide ISA thing going on as well. So
and I do not.
Deadlifts are, sort of come more naturally to me. So I do train them, but I train them less frequently because I can go back to a deadlift after 4 weeks of not moving it pretty heavy, and it'd still be able to get the stimulus that I need.
What are your best deadlift numbers? I know you've knocked out some pretty serious numbers rep wise and weight wise.
I did 252, which was triple body weight at the time, and I did it without a belt and without straps, which was something that I wanted to get to. Since then, I'm just kind of like in a maintenance zone. I haven't been above 230 for a year.
Yeah. But you did like 180 for something stupid, didn't you?
I did 200 for 10 in the pursuit of doing like that 250, which probably surprised me as much. But anyway, deadlifts, they're in there somewhere, but just not in this particular phase. And then from a upper body standpoint, most sessions will begin with a bench press. Then I move into either dips, I like dips, ring dips, I think they're good, or like an incline bench. So I very rarely have both of them in the same session. I'll take a pick and I'll rotate through them in different programs. And then I have I typically go into like a unilateral variation. So single arm kettlebell press, single arm landmine press, alternating hook line dumbbell press, something like that. And then whatever's just going to give me a bit of stimulus at the end of the session for arms. So
very important.
Yeah. Because t-shirts, right?
That's it. If you don't want big arms, you're wrong.
Exactly. And
also very functional. And
I mean, everyone's welcome to their interpretation of it, but it's exactly right for me.
Yeah.
Arms are important.
Yeah.
So there'll be some sort of isolation work for the guns.
Yeah. And even just outside of the aesthetic reasons of having big arms, which is enough anyway, definitely for shoulder health as well too. I think people underestimate biceps and triceps across the shoulder blade. Very important for shoulder stability, and you train them in so many different ranges to train different parts of the...
Even in that exercise selection, I'm still trying to incorporate things that are going to benefit the position of my structure. Mm-hmm. So I will do the majority of my bicep work single arm. I'll try and include an element of shifting the sternum into the curl, so I'm getting that posterior expansion. And then usually tricep isolation work for me will be in a hook line position, or, sort of reaching over and again looking for that posterior expansion. So I'm still trying to include that. They're typically, my upper body work doesn't really vary that much from them. And then lastly, I think one of my top exercises will be running or sprinting, or rowing, ski erg. I've been doing a workout now on a Saturday every week, which is 2K row, 2K run, 2K ski, and then 1.5K row, 1.5K run, 1.5K ski, and then a kilometer on each, and then 500 meters on each. So it's about an hour 15, 5K in total on each of the exercises, 15K in total for the workout, and that's just my lungs, blow everything out. I think running should be, in some degree, in everyone's program. A lot of the compensations that we can collect from doing heavy, symmetrical, bilateral movements in the gym can be unraveled with a sprint session or a long distance run. You can also pick up issues in those things, but for me, it's just been a good way of keeping the system healthy. So, sprinting is always going to be up there.
And as a human being, one of the more functional things you can do, just be able to run.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention all of the pull exercises that I do in the upper body workout. So I just try to pull at two different angles. So chin ups or pull ups are typically my main back exercises or my main pull exercises, and then I'll probably do a row variation to sort of hit the other direction, and that's typically either just going to be on a barbell or a 3-point row.
Mm-hmm. All very good exercise, mate. I vibe a lot with training at home with just a rack and a barbell and minimal equipment as well too.
I do miss the machines every now and then, so I'll come in, make use of our beautiful spaces, and use a lat pull down, use a seated row, use a chest press machine, use a pendulum squat. Fantastic piece of equipment. It's just that my schedule, my environment has led me to be training with more free weights I try to choose exercises where I get most bang for buck, and often where the systems are well integrated, and then just like a couple of ego exercises for the parts of my body that my partner likes.
Very important. Fair enough. We'll leave it there, mate.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming in again.
Pleasure, mate. Congratulations on this. As we were saying before, most podcasts don't make it past 20 sessions.
Yeah.
I think last time I was on, whether it was on the mic or off the mic, I said how good an idea I think it is. I think it's fantastic. I think it's having a huge impact on the culture in the Surrey Hills Club as well. And it's great to hear our coaches on here, talking about themselves and their businesses, and being excellent brand advocates as well.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, mate. Spread the good word. So thank you so much, mate. I appreciate
Absolute pleasure.
it. Legend. That's good, mate.